Welcome to the Thoughtful Leader podcast. My name is Ben Brearley. I'm a leadership coach and the founder of Thoughtful Leader. The Thoughtful Leader podcast is all about short, sharp leadership advice because thoughtful leadership is good leadership. Welcome to episode 206 of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. In this episode, we are going to tackle the important topic of core values and more specifically, understanding your core values to be able to lead better. I quite like working with leaders to identify their core values because it gives them a unique personal perspective that they can use as a foundation to lead better and to understand themselves and how they operate a little bit better as well. So I'll help you do that in this episode. Let's get into it right now. Knowing your values in leadership will help you in quite a few different ways. However, I speak to leaders frequently and I notice that a lot of them don't actually take the time to do this or aren't really aware of this sort of activity. Some leaders aren't really aware of how knowing their values will help them, and others are focused on other priorities like trying to get their team working well together, which is understandable, I suppose. And then there are those that may consider understanding their values in leadership to be, kind of a hippie concept that's not worth worrying about. So in this episode, I'm going to cover why I think understanding your values is important. I'll also look at some ways how they can help you and how you can find out what they are. And after all, I'm generally quite pragmatic. I don't really like theory without being able to apply it somehow. So that's why I'll introduce some ways for you to identify your own core values. But before we get into that, you may have come across something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs during your career. The basic concept behind this theory is that there are several levels of needs we have as humans. And once you accomplish the lower level needs, such as survival needs, we start to focus on fulfilling the needs higher up the pyramid, such as achieving belonging, respect, and other social needs. And from a leadership perspective, I like to think of it this way. So at the bottom, we have our survival needs, and that might be, I need this job so I can eat and feed my family. And then the second level might be living. This job helps me to provide for myself and others, and I get more money when I'm undertaking a leadership role. Then there's the love needs or social needs. This might be something like, I want to create a safe, close, and supportive team. Then there's the esteem needs, and this might be about wanting to feel respected and valued as a leader. And then the very top is where you start to get into the self-actualization or self-transcendent area, which is, I want to be the best leader I can be and enjoy my work, and then I'm going to help others grow and develop. I'll put the diagram of Maslow's hierarchy in the show notes page so you can see what I'm talking about. That'll be thoughtfulleader.com/206. Now, we often start our leadership journey being uncertain about our leadership role and how to do it, and this is when we're in surviving mode. And then we might even let team conflict or other dysfunction slide because we're so consumed about keeping our jobs and getting paid. As we become more confident and our leadership skills grow, we work our way up the pyramid. No longer focused on survival, our priorities can shift to wanting to create a positive environment and helping our team members achieve their own goals. And eventually we gain respect and start to feel valued, and then we start to want to enjoy our work and keep on improving our leadership skills to excel at our craft. Now, this model is not perfect and the theory has been around for many years, and I'll put a link to an article describing the core theory so you can see what I'm talking about in the show notes page. But I think it's useful to consider this from a values perspective. If a leader is in survival mode, do you think they're going to spend time thinking about their core values? Probably not. But as you go higher up the levels, you might find that you're starting to focus on improving your leadership, not as a means to just survive, but as a means to be a better leader and feel good about what you do. So knowing your values can help at all levels, in my opinion, but it's at the love, respect, and self-actualization levels of Maslow's hierarchy that I start to see leaders focusing on these types of personal development steps the most. Now, the website Ethics Sage tells us that values are basic and fundamental beliefs that guide or motivate attitudes or actions. So it's good to have that definition before we keep going. Now, these are the things that you believe are important at your core, and they can be shaped by your environment and upbringing as you go through life. And they help us decide what is right and wrong. But values can be different for everybody. There's no single best set of core values that everyone should strive to live by. So when we talk about values, there's things like trust, integrity, respect, honesty, equality, ethics, all these sorts of things could be considered as core values for different people. Now, there's no single set of values. Now, this is just as well because not every role or environment is suitable for every person. Our values can help you survive and thrive in different environments, and they can provide clarity when you notice yourself struggling or succeeding in different situations. So now I'm going to get on to how knowing your values in leadership can help you. Now, there's a few good ways that I think knowing your values can help in a leadership role, and here are the ones that I think are most important. The first one is values help you understand what your triggers might be. And everyone has triggers, and these are the things that can set you off, make you angry or upset, or have you doing things you normally wouldn't and don't want to be doing. Our triggers often come about because they clash with our values. Now, personally, one of my own values is that of responsibility, and this value is all about being dependable, reliable, and taking accountability for my own challenges and problems. So when I come across people who are stuck in a victim mindset, blaming the world for their issues, I find this extremely frustrating. And as a result, I try not to associate with these types of people too much. The ones that are all complaining but no action. But on the other hand, when I work with coaching clients who are taking accountability for their own life and trying to improve, I'm all in and I'll help them however I can. So knowing your values helps you to understand and raise awareness of your triggers. And this might be people doing things that trigger you or circumstances or environments that stress you out. And once you know your values, you can start to try to reduce the impact of triggers. So this might be about reducing the time spent being exposed to the trigger. Or maybe you'll practice visualization techniques to help you respond constructively when your trigger occurs. For example, if you need to attend meetings with somebody who triggers you, you might have a way of preparing for those meetings such that you feel good during them and can respond constructively in the moment. You can also try to avoid the triggering situation altogether. This might be about choosing who you associate with, which roles you take or organizations you work for, and that can be a great way to avoid being triggered as much as possible, although obviously in a work sense, we can't do that all the time. And I find this really useful to think about the sort of people I'm spending most of my time with, right? You might notice yourself spending time with people who just sort of drain your energy, and this could be something to do with the core values that you have, and maybe those people don't really hold those values and they're not aligned. So it's worth having a think about that and seeing whether you can associate with people or put yourself in environments where you're more likely to align with your own values. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. And there's a related podcast episode I'd advise you to listen to as well. Number 153, if you haven't already, Why Knowing Yourself Equals Better Leadership. So check that out too. The second thing about values is they help you play to your strengths. Now, your values can be a source of strength. When you're acting in alignment with your values, you will feel more motivated, more confident, and certain of the actions you are taking, and you can use this to your advantage. So here's another example from my own experience. Now, one of my own other strong values is harmony, and this one means that I value a sense of calm, inner peace, and contentment. I've noticed that the thing that conflicts with this the most is taking on too much work. As a result, I try as best I can to organize my weeks and days so that I'm not rushing from one thing to another. I try not to take on too many coaching or training clients at once, and I spread them out so that I'm not fully booked all the time and I have time to prepare and basically decompress. Now, when I'm running from one thing to another, on the other hand, I have a tendency to feel more stressed and anxious, and when I'm working in this state, I'm generally doing a worse job for the people I'm working for. And on the other hand, when I'm calm and at ease, that's when I can do my best work. Now, the third way that values can help you is to build strong relationships. So you'll understand your triggers. You can try to limit your association with people that trigger you, but you can also be open and honest about your values, letting people know what really matters to you. And this means they can work with you the way that you want them to, and they can try to bring out your strengths whenever possible. So when you talk about yourself and what's important to you, emphasize the strengths that come from your values. Do you value being dependable and reliable? So that's a pretty good leadership attribute to talk about. Do you value empathy? You can talk about how this helps you to build a great culture in your team. When people understand what makes you tick, you're likely to build a stronger bond with those that resonate with your own values. And these workplace relationships can be extremely valuable to support you in your leadership journey. There's a related article about how leaders can build strong working relationships, and I'll put that in the show notes page as well, thoughtfulleader.com/206. And of course, if you think I can help you on your leadership journey and you'd like to apply for a complimentary coaching session with me, you can also do that on that show notes page. I can't coach everyone, but if you don't apply, we will never know. So put your application in and we'll see if we can tee up a conversation. Now, another way that values can help you is to find the right role and culture fit. Many of us like to believe that we can succeed in any leadership role or in any organisation, but the reality is that we are better suited to some roles and cultures than others. Most organisations have a list of values that they believe represent their desired culture. These can be useful when you're trying to get people to behave in a certain way, and the values can be held up as the benchmark. Now, if your personal values happen to align closely with those of your organisation, you're likely to feel like you fit in better with the culture than someone whose values differ greatly. Now, think of the leader who is a fierce environmental advocate. If they work for a mining company that is not so concerned about their environmental impact, this leader is likely to feel conflicted. If, on the other hand, they work for some sort of conservation organisation, they may feel like their values are a better fit. They can feel satisfied that they aren't working for a cause that clashes with their values. Now, if you're looking for a new role, check the values of the organisation. Try to see whether they align with yours. Ask good questions during your interviews to see whether people actually walk the talk of these values or if those values are just lip service. And there's plenty of companies I've worked for and with that have a set of values on the wall and everyone basically ignores them. You want to find out whether that's the case with this company or it's actually some company that lives those values. So we've looked at some of the benefits of knowing our values, and it's time now to find out what they are. This doesn't need to be a complex task, but it can take time to refine your values list because you'll probably find a lot of them in the lists of values that I'll talk about in a minute that resonate with you. Now, sometimes I work with people using a set of values cards, and these are usually simple cards with a value on the front and a description of what it means or how to apply it on the back. And the set of cards that I use that I quite like is called the Live Your Values deck. And I've put that in the show notes page as well, a link to that, thoughtfulleader.com/206. I'm not affiliated with these cards in any way. I don't get any money from recommending them, but I quite like them. So if you are interested in that sort of thing, then I'd encourage you to check them out. Now, these particular cards have a description of the value on the front and also some ideas on how you could live this value more often or more consistently on the back. If you'd like to see a simple list of values instead and not worry about getting cards for this, then there's a few good free options as well. And I'll also put these on the show notes page. There's a values list from James Clear. So James Clear is the author of Atomic Habits, and he talks about setting good habits in life. There's also a values list that I've put on the show notes page, a link there from Brené Brown. Now, Brené Brown famously has the Dare to Lead program that she runs, so I'd recommend checking those two lists of values out. They are similar in many ways, but they can be a good starting point for you and they don't cost anything. So take a look at the different values lists or the deck of cards and decide which ones, and usually I'd stop at the top 5, resonate with you the most. Now, this can be challenging because there's often many that you'd like to pick, and the key is to identify the most critical values that you hold dear or are most important to you. And one important thing you should note here is that you should identify values based on how you are, not how you would like to be. That's not to say that you can't ever change, but it's best to know where you're starting from and work from there. Now, if you're struggling, try to think of moments in your life where you had success and failure. In these moments, what made you succeed or fail? These can be good clues as to whether your values were being met or not. And often you'll find that in your winning moments, you were acting in line with your values. And in your darkest moments, your environment, situation, or actions were probably out of alignment with your core values. Now, after you spend the time to identify your values, and remember, stick to the top 5, over the next few weeks, see what you notice. Are there times when you're not aligned with these values, or times when you're completely living them? How do you feel when you're in or out of alignment with your values in leadership? Over time, you'll be able to test out your list of values and make sure they are the right ones. You'll be able to feel how well they fit you as you go through your day-to-day life and reflect. And once you clearly understand your values, see if you can live them more often. The more you can bring them to the table, the better you'll feel and the more confident you'll be. So this might mean changing some of the people who you associate with so often, or it could be about joining groups of people or finding forums or environments that satisfy your values or where people are that actually align with what you stand for. So I'm interested in your responses to this question. What are your core values and how has knowing them helped you? Let me and all the Thoughtful Leaders know in the comments on the show notes page, thoughtfulleader.com/206. And while you're at it, if you have a few minutes and you enjoy this podcast or this episode, please leave a positive review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast player of choice. I've put a link in the show notes page for you to do that as well. I appreciate you taking the time to do that. And thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you found it useful. I hope you spend some time working out your core values because they can be a really useful tool to keep in your back pocket when you're leading teams. So take care of yourself and your team, lead thoughtfully, and I'll be back next week.